Hello, it's another episode of Everything Digital Health. I'm Marcus Bohr, and sadly, I'm here to tell you about some bad news for the open source world. You may recall a few months back, I did an episode about the NHS open source policies all disappearing overnight. That was probably getting on for 6 months ago. And at the time, we didn't really have any information about why that was. And NHS England said it was essentially a mistake because they were reorganising some websites, and it was to do with the transition between NHS Digital England, Department of Health Social Care. But what's happened this week kind of makes us doubt that a little bit, because I've had to wait a few days to go public with this until it was actually in the public domain. But for the last few days, it's been apparent that within the NHS, there has been a notice sent to all developers that all open source repositories are going to be closed unless they can make some kind of exception case as to why they should remain open. So this is, of course, a big blow for everybody who's worked in open source for more than 2 decades, really, in trying to keep governmental source code open. We've worked really hard to generate transparency around government work. And of course, taxpayer funded work should be in the open, and it should be open source, public money, public code. Let's go and show you some of the background to this. So the story's been broken by New Scientist, and the headline is NHS England rushes to hide software over AI hacking fears. And essentially, it looks very much like the aim of this sudden, hurried closing of all the software is because of a perceived risk from new artificial intelligence models. And in the last few weeks, we've been hearing about a new Anthropic model called Mythos, which has got apparently better cybersecurity hacking skills than previous models. Now, a lot of the other previous models actually were pretty good, so it's not dramatically different. I mean, if you look at there are some graphs available. I'll link to academic papers about Mythos, and it's better, but it's not twice as good, if you see what I mean. It's sort of following the general curve with time. And so this all feels like, firstly, a bit of a overreaction to Mythos, but also it won't work. And it's well rehearsed, the argument around security and obscurity. So hiding your source code does not make anything more secure. So sadly, this is a paywalled New Scientist article, but it essentially, puts out there that this is the thing. We know from my previous videos that the NHS service standard is very, very clear. You scroll down here, you will find point 12, make new source code open. And if you go into the detail page for that, you can see all of the reasons why they think that this should be done. And I fully agree. Public services built with public money. Open source code reduces duplication of effort. It saves time. In the teams I work in, it means that onboarding works faster. Clinical safety teams can see inside the code rather than that being something they have to apply for special permission for. It just makes everything better. It forces us into higher standards, and it makes us maintain those standards. And this, I think, has been a sort of central, pivotal tenet of governmental IT, really pioneered by the Government Digital Service, the GDS team, probably about 15 years ago. And it feels like an incredible backtracking for NHS England to do this, especially when none of the other agencies are doing this at all. Just an example, this is a kind of scraped community effort to bring together all the government public repositories. You'll see there are nearly 25,000 government public repositories. Most of them are not from the NHS, but they're from all kinds of organisations like GCHQ. You'd think if there was a significantly increased risk from cybersecurity that GCHQ might be aware of it and be doing something. They might also be removing their source code, but it doesn't seem to be happening. And also, this is a testament to the amount of work that's been done in the past couple of decades to bring open source to government and to bring that transparency that comes with that, and to make our software shareable and reusable as well. Other parts of government are not having this knee-jerk reaction that the NHS leadership are having. It's not very clear who makes these decisions. So the internal memo sort of thing doesn't really have an attribution. It doesn't have a name of a person or a name of a team that have made those decisions. At best, it refers to a kind of engineering council or committee, but it doesn't tell us who's on that engineering council or committee. And I think that's going to have to be found out. I think it's very important that we find out who is making these decisions on the behalf of thousands of other people who work within open source in the NHS. So does Mythos mean you need to shut down your open source repositories? Well, Terence Eden, who's an open source advocate and a very learned colleague, is very clear about it and manages to get it into a single screen's worth of blog. The answer is no. Firstly, if your source code was open source and you suddenly close it now, it's already gone. The source code is already in the training data for multiple AI models. But even without that, even if you've always been closed source, Mythos and other models can find vulnerabilities in a closed source black box binary. They can find vulnerabilities that way. What you miss out on when you are closed source is the ability of the community to do that finding of bugs for you and let you know about them. And there are established bug bounty programs, things like HackerOne. There are many, many ways for the community to find bugs before the bad guys find the bugs, tell you about them, and you fix them. And then open source becomes more robust. There's a really good argument around immune system. If your immune system has never been challenged, then you actually have a very weak immune system. Immunity is developed in the human body by being challenged by constant invasion, and that's how you make it stronger. Terence Eden has also put out an updated blog today based on the news around this SDLC 8 guidance note, and actually has a source that has been able to include this guidance note that says all source code repositories must be private by default, which is a huge ask to happen instantaneously. And there is no good rationale here for that to happen. This is an absolute knee-jerk panic response. And I think in a few months' time, doing this in response to Mythos is going to look like having bought a nuclear bunker in case the year 2000 bug turned the world upside down. You know, it's not going to be as big a deal as all that when Mythos is released. It's slightly better than preceding models. The open source world will not melt down. I guarantee there'll be some important cyber attacks that happen, but they could happen just as much to closed source platforms as they could happen to open source platforms. And the world will carry on. My favorite platform, Discourse, is not going closed source, and they've articulated many of the similar views and done a very good job there. So I recommend that as another good source of information about, you know, the utter folly of closed sourcing things in order to protect yourself. What you can do if you need to protect yourself is start looking at your code, start using models to immediately review and look for vulnerabilities. And there are widely publicized techniques for doing that, ways to iterate through your source code. Whether it's open or closed, you have access to it. You iterate through it and you look for zero-day exploits. Essentially, that's what you're looking for. But all of a sudden, it now certainly seems a little bit more consistent with what we found last year. So the open source policies all disappeared, and now the open source code has all disappeared. And I think those two things happening, it could just be coincidence. It could just be incompetence. And, you know, there is plenty of that in NHS England. But it also starts to look a little bit like a deliberate policy. So let's see. The next move is in NHS England's hands. Are they closed sourcing everything? Are they taking away the benefits of open source that we've fought for over 15 years? And if so, I think that they will find that they'll regret that in the future, because it will drive away some of the best talent in software development. It will slow down their development. It will make everything more expensive. It will not add to their security profile, because if your security is based around obscuring things, you're absolutely toast. What can you do next? Well, there is an open letter which is being published, and I would encourage any of you who feel strongly about this to go to the keepthingsopen.com URL, and you can add your signature. I've already added my signature. I feel very strongly about this, as you will probably well know. So I would encourage you to go and sign it, share it with as many people as possible, put it in your work Slack, put it in your social medias, drop it into forums that you frequent. Let's get this a really strong message that we believe that the NHS England is wrong to do this. And I think there's a secondary storage, which is, I want to know who makes these decisions and on what basis do they make them. And I want to know what we can do about that, because clearly it doesn't feel to me as though the leadership of NHS technology is reflective of the wider technological stance on cybersecurity and open source and those kind of issues. So if that's what is happening, then we need to do something about the leadership of technology in the NHS. I'll leave it there. I wanted this to just be a quick and short explainer of what has gone on this week. I think this story will continue to develop, and it'd be nice to find out a little bit more information. But right now, as it stands, there is a deadline of May the 11th, upon which all the repositories under NHS England's control will become private repositories or closed source. The only ones that will be allowed to remain open source will be ones who have approached NHS England and made a case for an exemption. Now, that in itself is extra work. And I think you'll agree that at a time when cybersecurity threats are as high as this, the last thing our engineering teams need to be doing is writing explanatory text to beg for their open source status to remain. All in all, it's a rather disappointing situation to be in after all the work that's happened in open source for the last 15 to 20 years in the NHS. I'll keep you posted, but you know what to do.